Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Sonia Faradila, and I want to present my proposal, which entitled Students Writing Quality on the Applications of Google Classroom for Learning Writing in Senior High School. The first is Chapter 1, and it starts from the background of the study. In Indonesia, writing becomes one of the productive skills that have to be mastered by EFL students. However, most of students consider writing to be the most difficult skills from the others. It happens due to some causes, such as lack of reading and the way of teaching. Therefore, to solve this problem, the teachers can use media to assist in learning writing process, such as Google Classroom. Google Classroom is one of the platforms that are widely used recently by students and teachers for teaching learning process. And I also provide some previous studies that investigate the use of Google Classroom for learning English. The first is Rizal 2019, who examined the use of feedback through Google Classroom for improving writing English performance. And the result is providing feedback through Google Classroom had positive effect on the students' writing quality. And the second is Jana and Yuniarti 2019, who investigate Google Classroom on a student's learning writing process. And the result is, by using Google Classroom, it can motivate students to write and improve their writing skill. And the last is Abdul Shakur et al. 2020, who examined the effectiveness of Google Classroom for learning English. And the result is, the use of Google Classroom is quite effective for students to learn the material deeply. So I find the research gap. Even though many researchers have conducted the research about the use of Google Classroom for English learning process, still there are few researchers that investigate the quality of students' writing through the applications of Google Classroom for learning writing. Therefore, I formulate two research questions here. The first is, how are the students' writing quality by using Google Classroom in learning writing analytical exposition text? And the second is, how are the students' responses on the applications of learning writing analytical exposition text using Google Classroom? Then, significance of the study. For the teacher, it can be used to help the teacher evaluate learning writing using Google Classroom, whether it is effective or not for students. While for the students, they can see from a broad perspective about the application of Google Classroom for learning writing. Then, they can conclude whether the use of Google Classroom is helpful or not for learning writing. And the last is for the other researcher, they can be used it as a reference for those who have an interest in the same fields. And for the scope and limitations, it limited to the students' writing quality on the application of online learning media, especially the use of Google Classroom for learning writing. And then the locations for conducting the research is in one of state senior high schools in Sidoarjo, and for the subjects is 11 grade students who have learned analytical exposition text. And this is the key terms of the study. There are writing skill, applications, learning media, Google Classroom, learning writing, and analytical exposition text. And then next to the chapter 2 about literature review. In literature review, we'll discuss several components. The first is writing. There are definitions of writing skill, writing process, component, and assessment of writing. And then for the Google Classroom, there are definitions of Google Classroom, the features of Google Classroom, advantages and disadvantages of Google Classroom. And for analytical exposition text, there are definitions of analytical exposition text, the structures, and also the language features of analytical exposition text. And last, it's discussed about learning writing using Google Classroom. Next is chapter 3. It is about research methodology. The first is research design, and the researcher used qualitative research with the type of document or content analysis, since the researcher investigates the students' writing quality. While for the subject of the study, there are 11 grade students from one of state senior high schools in Sidoarjo. It means that the setting is also in one of state senior high schools in Sidoarjo. They will be selected by using purposive sampling because they are selected based on certain characteristics. They are who already use Google Classroom for learning writing, especially analytical exposition tasks. Data and source of data. The data of the study is the students' response on the application of Google Classroom for learning writing and also their writing result. And source of data is obtained from document of students' writing result, questionnaire, and also interview. Next is instrument. Here the researcher used three kinds of instrument. The first is document, the second is questionnaire, and the last is interview. Document here is the student's writing result about analytical exposition text. It is used to answer the first research questions about students' writing quality. While for questionnaire, the researcher used close-ended questionnaire with yes or no answer choice, and it is used to answer second research questions about the response of the students on the applications of Google Classroom for learning writing. And the last is interview. The researcher used semi-structured interview, and the researcher makes two kinds of interview. The first is positive response, and the second is negative response. Positive response is used to interview the students who have positive response on the applications of Google Classroom for learning writing, while the negative, it is used for the students who have negative response on the use of Google Classroom for learning writing. And this interview is used to support the data of the questionnaire. And then about the procedures or data analysis technique. The first, students have learned analytical exposition tasks previously through Google Classroom, and then the researcher asks the students' writing to be assessed to know the students' writing quality. After that, the researcher distributes questionnaires to the students by using Google Form to know their response regarding to the applications of Google Classroom for learning writing. And last is the researchers conducts an interview to some students for supporting the data of questionnaires. And for data analysis, students' writing result will be analyzed by using writing rubric. And then all of the result of the 5 components are added up and divided by the amount of the components. And their writing's quality will be determined by using student success indicator. And then the result of the questionnaires on G-form will be analyzed manually and presented in percentage form. Each question item on the questionnaire will be analyzed based on the percentage result, and the researcher will describe the result of the percentage of each item in the form of words. And last is the result of interview. It will be analyzed by using 3 phases. The first is familiarizing and organizing, coding and reducing, interpreting and representing. The researchers begins to analyze the data by reading the students' answer to the interview carefully. Then, the researchers interprets all data by transcribing it into written form. After that, the researchers reduce and sort the data that is not needed for the research. Finally, the researchers describe the result descriptively in the form of words. That's all of my presentations. Thanks for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.